What is going on, everybody? I am back today. If you can see, I have my Charlotte Bronte Jane Eyre t-shirt on. And if you didn't know, I am a huge fan of period piece dramas. I know that might take you by surprise, but I am one of my favorite films of all time is Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread. I was a huge fan of the film The Taste of Things from last year. Love Jane Eyre. I love Anya Taylor-Joy's Emma. There are a ton of period piece movies that I love. I love the attention to detail and the costume design. I love the dialogue. There's just something so charming about immersing yourself in a different time period and utilizing that time period to convey a specific message. For instance, Jane Eyre, which is an incredibly powerful message about feminism and about a young girl who essentially has to make a life for herself despite being an orphan and all of the horrible things that she has to go through to get to a point in her life where she can be self-sufficient. And I think it's a really beautiful story, and I love beautiful stories like that. And this movie in particular that I'm going to be talking about today, I saw a trailer for it a couple of times while I was at the theater, and I think it was at my AMC only for like a week, and I missed the show times because life was just incredibly busy, but it became available on VOD this week, and the trailer looked pretty solid. I was looking forward to checking it out. It's a story that I thought would be relatively interesting, and the movie I'm going to be telling you about today is Widow Clicquot. Widow Clicquot is directed by Thomas Napper. After her husband's death, Madame Clicquot flouts convention by assuming the reins of their wine business, defying her critics and ultimately revolutionizing the champagne industry, establishing her as one of the world's first great businesswomen. So, as I said, big fan of period piece dramas. I was really looking forward to watching this movie, and this movie was pretty good. It definitely has its fair share of flaws. I was relatively unsatisfied by the ending, but I think the core of what the movie's going for, I can really get behind. The lead performance in this movie is exceptional, and there's a lot to enjoy about it, and I'm going to tell you about it a little bit today when I break the movie down. So at the beginning of the film, we are introduced to Barb Nicole, played by Haley Bennett, and recently her husband Francois has passed away, and she is left alone on this vineyard where they both made wine and champagne together for so many years. They have a child together, and she is completely and totally distraught by the loss of her husband. And she is approached by a lot of men in the community who want to give her a large sum of money to take over the vineyard. But the vineyard is really the happiest memory that she has left of her husband, and she likes the work. She likes being there. She likes working on creating the product, and she has a lot of ideas for how to make it successful on her own, despite a lot of criticisms that she received from not only her husband, but other people that work on the vineyard with them. And so she tells these men, I'm going to keep working here, and I'm going to keep trying to make this business successful. It's what my husband would have wanted. Now, this is during the reign of Napoleon, and so there are a lot of different laws in place, but because there is a specific law in place saying that she is a widow taking over her husband's business, she is legally allowed to continue to run it. And so the entirety of the film is we see the struggles that she goes through to keep the business afloat, and all the new ideas she tries to introduce, the different recipes that she tries to make of champagne to kind of make it her own, and the flashbacks that she has to her and her husband's marriage, showing the romance that they had, the issues that they had along the way, and what got her to this point. So as I said, I thought this movie was pretty good, despite the fact that I think it has a numerous amount of flaws. I will say Haley Bennett's performance as the lead here is phenomenal. There are a lot of scenes where it has to show very intense emotionality, and there's a lot to do with her facial expressions and in moments of isolation, and she really eats up the screen time. I was really impressed with just how amazing of a job that she does. She has a few monologues in this movie that I think she nails really well, and I know she's been in things before. I remember seeing her in the film Swallow not too long ago. She's done a few movies in the past that I've really appreciated her performance, but I really liked seeing her here in a very standout role, playing this incredibly powerful woman who is so well renowned in the history books as being like this pioneer in a time period where women weren't necessarily like looked at in a powerful way, and that they were often told they couldn't do things like this. And I loved seeing her succeed in a role that's just so powerful and so incredible, and she was really great. Most of the actors in this movie do a pretty solid job, except I was not a huge fan of the actor who played her late husband. A lot of times when he was on screen, I just felt like her performance was surpassing his so much that they just could have recasted that role, and I think I would have been a little bit more invested. The movie is pretty well shot. It's set mostly on the vineyard, so relatively isolated location, but they pay close enough attention to detail in the contrast with the really like hopeless moments to a lot more of the hopeful and joyful moments to kind of desaturate the cinematography, make it feel a little bit more gloomy and gross when things feel a little bit more hopeless. And I liked that a lot. The costume design in this movie was great. I feel like whenever you're making a period piece, like the attention to detail and the outfits people are wearing to make them period accurate is so important. And I really liked the costume design in this movie. And there was clearly a lot of time and effort and energy put into how this movie looks. I also enjoyed the sound design for the most part and the musical choices. I think they accompany the film well and make it a pretty easy watch. Overall, thematically, obviously, the most important thing to take away from this movie is like looking at a woman who is living in a time period where men did not want women to be successful. They didn't want them to run businesses. They didn't want them to do these things. They wanted them to be stay-at-home wives that didn't do anything else and that essentially keep their mouth shut. And to have this really powerful character who we see has pioneered so many different techniques that still exist in the champagne making industry today, it was cool to see. I do think some of the flashback sequences surrounding the romance with her husband and like some of the flings that are established after her husband passed away, sometimes they overshadow that message, where I feel like the movie could have been restructured in moments to focus a little bit more on her achievements and the things that she was succeeding. And I understand the importance of like showcasing what her husband meant to her in her life and like what, you know, these romantic flings she's having after her husband passed away because of the desperation for human connection and just to feel something when you're in such an isolated and lonely state. There's purpose behind those reasonings, but I feel like if there was more associated with her achievements and the things that she was able to accomplish and her successes, that I would have felt like the movie as a whole was a lot more successful. I feel like the third act is a little bit of a mess. The movie has a scene, and there's a really powerful moment in the third act that sat with me and that I thought was really beautiful. But instead of like having that scene occur and then showcasing us a little bit more after that sequence, we get just like this really long, almost like 3-page on-screen text of like everything that happened to her afterwards. And it just makes the movie feel a little less satisfying. Like it's not enough of a gut punch of a scene to really sit with you and feel like, oh, that was incredibly satisfying. I was just looking and wanting so much more. Not necessarily like overly expositional, but just like giving us a little bit more that made the movie feel satisfying. And I don't know if that was budgetary limitations or if the director really thought that that one sequence in particular was going to be enough to just be like, oh man, the audience is going to love that being the end of the movie. I don't really feel like that was the case whatsoever. But despite that, I think Haley Bennett's fantastic performance and a lot of what's going on here as far as the empowerment of women and like seeing a strong woman in this specific circumstance makes the movie a worthwhile watch despite any of the problems that I have with it. So have you seen Widow Clicquot? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was really charming. I thought that it was a really great story about a very powerful woman. I just wish there were certain things cleaned up to make this a movie that I love rather than a movie that I just enjoyed. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.